Thank you very much, Julia. It's very kind of you. I wish I could be there. I've just been very ill and in hospital, and I'm still recovering. It's just too hard for me to travel, but hopefully we'll get through the next half an hour. I think we did okay yesterday in our workshop. And okay, so I've got to do a screen share. Here it is. Just let me ask, is that working okay? And
yes, that looks great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Just have to on my screen. Okay. So this is a really brief report about a big study that I've been doing in Australian languages. The purpose is to understand patterns of meaning in Australian languages on their own terms and in relation to each other, rather than by comparison with other languages outside the region. Stories have been analysed from 20 languages around Australia. 2 are from SFL language descriptions by Anna Crane and myself, but most are taken from descriptivist grammars that include stories as appendices. The study is conceived as a journey around the continent, starting with the earliest recorded story in the Gamilaroi language of northern New South Wales, then up to Cape York, through the Gulf of Carpentaria to Arnhem Land, then west to the Kimberley region of WA, back again to North Queensland, returning through Central Australia to the west coast and back through the desert to the Lake Eyre region, Flinders Ranges, and finally back to New South Wales. So today, okay, we're just going to sort this out. Okay. So today I'm just going to look at samples from 6 of the languages that illustrate the diversity of patterning that's evolved over 50,000 years, I should say, of First Nations history. Starting with Gamilaroi in New South Wales, then Jiwali on the west coast, Aranda in the centre, Jaro in the northwest, Adyamathanha in South Australia, and finally Gidja in the Kimberley. So the informing theory for our studies, our stratified model of genre, register and language, which assumes that all semiotic strata are organised axially as systems and structures. Genre configures variations in feel, mode and tenor, which are realised in the metafunctional systems of discourse semantics, lexicogrammar and phonology. So we could approach the stories from any of these dimensions. I actually started this journey back in 2005, comparing how register variables are realised in patterns of discourse in stories around the world. More recently, I looked at how listener positions are constructed in traditional stories through their structuring and character perspectives. And today the focus is on grammatical realisations of discourse semantic patterns. So as I said, most of the stories come from published grammar descriptions. The glosses in these descriptive accounts are a mix of formal and functional labels for each morpheme, followed by a so-called free translation of one or more clauses. For example, this text segment's from a story presented as a series of words with lexical and grammatical glosses that are then translated as 2 English sentences. And this presentation obscures its clause and group rank structuring. It actually consists of 5 clauses, including 2 independent clauses and a dependent clause complex. So as these are actual texts, it's possible to reinterpret the glossing in terms of function and rank. These meta-translations involve a lot of shunting up and down between ranks and between the text and the grammar descriptions to figure out the functional paradigms at each rank. The first step is to organise a text into finite independent clauses and then figure out the clause and group rank functions. And this in turn helps to reanalyse the word and morpheme functions. And finally, each clause can be glossed, keeping as close as possible to the original functions, so they're not simply free translations. So here's what the text looked like with function rank labelling and clause rank glosses. The first line analyses theme, which is realised by first position in Australian languages. Textual, interpersonal, circumstantial, and participant themes are labelled, abbreviated here as PTH. Then clause rank functions are labelled, which in these stories are mostly transitivity functions. Group rank functions are labelled only when there's more than one item to minimise clutter. And word rank functions for each item are given an interlinear gloss. So 3 interwoven discourse semantic threads in stories are sequencing of events, at the same time as introducing and tracking the identities of participants and indicating their roles in the event, in each event. These threads are drawn together in its reticulum from Jim Martin's 1983 comparative study of stories that follows Gleason's stratification modelling of discourse structures. The immediate succession between events is realised by conjunctions. Participants are presented or presumed by nominal groups or pronominal reference. And relations between entities and occurrences in each figure are realised as transitivity roles. So these three discourse semantic functions interact in various ways as they're woven together in the grammar of different languages. The ways in which participants are presented and tracked vary with the nuclearity of their roles. Core roles in Australian languages, which we're calling P1, include actor, censor, sayer. In transitive material, mental and verbal clauses, the process is extended to a second participant or P2. In relational clauses, both P1 and P2 are obligatory, and P3 roles are more marginal and less frequent. Well, one familiar strategy for tracking identities together with their transitivity roles is to first present them as nominal groups and then presume them as pronouns. Nominal groups and pronouns are always marked as participants or circumstances in Australian languages. And participants may also be marked as P1, P2, and P3. A less familiar strategy is to presume P1 identities as the same or switched from the preceding clause. The switch reference strategy is tied to sequencing, either by combining it with conjunctions between clauses or with the aspect of dependent clauses. Connection may be realised by a free conjunction at the start of a clause or by a clitic conjunction attached to the last element of the preceding clause. In non-finite dependent clauses, it may be realised by the aspect of the verb as perfective to do or imperfective doing. Pronouns may also be free pronouns or clitics attached to other items. One strategy is to attach clitic pronouns to the first clause element, so they're included within the theme. Another is to have a special textual item that clitic pronouns are attached to that may come first in the clause. And finally, the pronominal functions of person, number, and gender may be grammaticalized as prefixes and suffixes attached to verbs. Participants may be presented as nominal groups marked for gender and number. Their transitivity roles are then shown by verb affixes with the same gender and number. And then they can be tracked as following verb affixes. So the first story is from the Gamilaroi language of northern New South Wales. It's a traditional story that's very widespread in Australia about an emu and brolga who trick each other, resulting in characteristic features of these birds. Gamilaroi uses the strategies of pronouns and case marking to identify participants in their roles. So the first clause presents emu and brolga as theme. I'll just read this out. Dinawan bula brolga yanela ni uragagu. So the first clause presents emu and brolga as theme, labelled here as PTH. This is realised as a pronoun complex in which the pronoun bula refers to both emu and brolga, indicates their role as P1 actor in this non-effective material clause. The second clause then presumes their identity by ellipsis. Ngaringa mawigilani. The third clause presumes them with the same dual pronoun. Bularu, burala, burala gu gango. So it presents them with the same dual pronoun. This time it's marked with an ergative suffix bularu, identifying both birds as possessors of many children. This is a verbless attributive clause that's common in Australian languages. So the next story is from the Jiwali language in the Pilbara region of WA. This story is about an earthquake that the teller experienced as a child when travelling with his parents. Jiwali uses switch reference to track P1 identities. Like Gamilaroi, Jiwali presents major participants as themes. So I'll see if I can read this Pipi ju ngarla papu ju ngarla, minpun panti, yanja, kata wurn. So we can see here that the major participants is presented as theme. The storyteller's parents are presented in a nominal group complex in which each item is added with an additive suffix. Jiwali doesn't use case to show transitivity roles. And the sequence of events is realized by a clitic conjunction at the end of the first clause. The next event, Kawari lari nguntari yarki la jilia, is realized by a non-finite beta clause in which the process is realized by a verb with perfective aspect. Nguntai, to lie. The perfective verb suffix also indicates that P1 is the same as the preceding clause, my mother and father. And the next event is also realized by a non-finite beta clause, Papa nguntai inyai jiraya. But this time the aspect's imperfective ngukantai, lying. The verb suffix also indicates that the P1 identity is switched from the parents to the water laying in the clay pan. Okay, so the next story is from the Aranda language in Central Australia. This is a traditional story about a little girl who befriends a baby kangaroo called a joey. Aranda combines the strategies of pronouns, case and switch conjunctions. Aranda presents major participants at the end of a clause. Here is the existence, in an existential cause. Primera arla quella naka ampa marla quaka nyanta. And the second clause begins by sequencing the events with a conjunction. Kula merita aratelia mela atwatya quaka nyanta. So we start with a conjunction. Little girl is then referred to with a clitic pronoun attached to the conjunction. So immatura, which identifies it as P1. And the joey is then presented as a clause final new. This is a non-finite beta clause with a verb marked as imperfective aspect, finding. The alpha clause then presumes the little girl as theme. Marla quickera quillananta atwitya quicka kerwa. With a pronoun now functioning as a deictic, as a nominal group suffix. The joey is also presented with a nominal group in which the deictic suffix is marked as dative, equira, which is common for pre-the roles in Australian languages. So he's the beneficiary in this case. The last clause here begins with an additive conjunction. Kuna atwatya quicker aratium quitata thura. And that also indicates that P1 switched from the preceding clause. The joey is then presumed as P1 with the suffix r as deictic. So while Jiwali and Aranda both use the switch P1 strategy, Jiwali does it with the aspect of dependent clauses, while Aranda uses additive conjunctions. Jiwali also realized the sequence with clause final clitic conjunctions, while Aranda uses clause initial conjunctions. The next story is from the Jaro language in northwestern Australia. This is an amusing story in which the storyteller chases a kangaroo on horseback and catches it by hand. Jaro tracks identities with clitic pronouns that are attached to the first element in a clause or to a special textual item that can come first in the clause. Now, the first clause here is a non-finite beta clause. Pulumanu manu parmarali parmara. And it thematizes the purpose of the activity, mustering cattle on horseback. These were the days when Aboriginal people became pastoral workers for the Europeans who took control of their traditional lands. The alpha clause, ngachalu yani nyura, then begins with a textual item, nga, labeled as PTH here, and the clitic pronoun njalu then identifies P1 as the speaker, plus others we. we were traveling. As in GYLE, sequencing is realized by a clause final clitic conjunction. The next clause also starts with nganjayani, and the clitic pronoun presumes the speaker is P1. The next story is from the Adbatana language in South Australia. These stories recount about traditional practices around love and marriage. Adbatana tracks identities with clitic pronouns attached to the verb realizing the process. It also marks case with nominal suffixes. So here, in the first clause, the one beta, Yura Yangari Widningku. The first participant is presented as theme. In a dependent clause, Yura Yangari, a young man. The alpha clause, Abanangabalana, Abanangago, Nagunda wa. Okay, it presents a second participant as theme, Ngabalana, a young woman. And this is marked with absolutive suffix, making it a P2 phenomenon in this mental clause. The young man is then presumed by the clitic pronoun wa following the process. The next clause, Widnindu Bila Angu, presumes both the man and the woman with a dual clitic pronoun bila following the process. And this is followed by a clitic conjunction realizing succession to the next event. The last clause, Valanabaila Mangunagunagunorinda, presumes them both, but this time with a full pronoun Valanaba. The suffix idla marks this as a marked theme that signals a new phase in the story. The last story is from the Gidja language in northwestern Australia. This is a traditional story that starts with a ceremony involving a crocodile, a bat, and other animals. Gidja presents participants as nominal groups with a suffix indicating gender. It presumes identities and indicates their transitivity roles, with prefixes and suffixes on the verbal group realizing the process. This first clause presents participants in the ceremony as Warangari mob, Warangaring Warakparani Lalankarani. And so it presents the participants with a neutral gender suffix, and masculine and feminine gender are inherently singular, whereas neutral gender may be singular or plural. So processes in Gidja are typically realized by a verb duplex with a lexical specifier and a general event. And these terms come from Anna Crane's description of Gidja. In intransitive clauses like this one, the P1 role is realized by a prefix on the general verb realizing the event. Here, P1 specified as plural, which agrees with the neutral nominal suffix on Warangari and thus identifies Warangari as P1. Crocodiles then specified at the end of the clause with masculine gender. This is a common pattern in Australian languages of specifying an identity at the end of a clause. Its textual function is labelled here as P specify, as in participant specify. Next clause presents two participants. Wanakanji Pinjirmin, Kalumpum Benan Manji. And the bat Pinjimi is inflected as masculine, and the spear Kalumpu inflected as neutral. And their roles are indicated by a portmanteau verb prefix, which marks P1 as third person singular and P2 as third neutral. And the P1 identity is then reprised as a suffix that specifies its gender as masculine, which agrees with the nominal suffix on Pinjirimi bat. The next two clauses track the identities of P1, of the identities of bat and crocodile as verb affixes. So Wente Jinginini, the first intransitive clause, the masculine verb prefix presumes the bat in the preceding clause as the actor of throwing. And in the next transitive clause, the portmanteau prefix identifies the bat as singular actor and the crocodile as masculine goal. The suffix then specifies the actor as the masculine bat. The English gloss requires crocodile to be renamed to avoid ambiguity, whereas Gidja distinguishes the identity as bat as actor and crocodile as goal in the verb prefix, and further specifies bat by the suffix. Summing up, we've been looking at realizational strategies for sequencing events, identifying participants, and specifying their roles. Well, one way we can look at relations between the languages is the topology of realization strategies. The interrelations are complex, but we can simplify them as a continuum of structure types, from verb affixes to post-verbal clitic pronouns, to thematic clitic pronouns, to full pronouns, to nominal cases, to switch P1 conjunctions, to sequencing conjunctions. In this perspective, Gidgee stands out from the other languages as it uses verb affixes and little or none of the other strategies. Adyamatana uses post-verbal clitic pronouns and conjunctions. Jaru uses clitic pronouns as theme and conjunctions. Gamilaroi uses pronouns with case inflections. Jiwali uses switch reference and conjunctions. And Aranda uses pronouns, case marking, and switch references and conjunctions. So these typological implications can be mapped geographically. So how have these different strategies evolved? Well, one possibility is that they evolved through the Ice Age, which ended about 9,000 years ago in Australia, and in the depth of the Ice Age, the arid zone expanded and isolated First Nations populations in what the archaeologists called refugia. We can see that the languages we selected here correspond in many ways with these refugia that the archaeologists have posited. Gidgee stands out because the verb affix strategy is spread across Northern Australia, and whereas the other strategies of pronouns and conjunctions are spread across the rest of Australia. And as the Ice Age retreated, the arid zone was reoccupied, and we can see these kinds of spreads in terms of the way that each of these realizational strategies for our discourse functions have expanded across the continent. And the evidence is the languages that we're mapping today. So I think we reached 10:55, which was the time I discussed with Julia. So I'll take a stop there and we'll start with questions. Thank you.